All right, thank you so much. So before I hand it over to my colleague, my partner in crime, Guy Thibault, for his final words here, I did want to take a moment to thank our strategic partners and operational partners. It's really thanks to you that all this magic happens. So RBC Insurance, our premier partner, ADGA, Data Miner, KPMG, Lockheed Martin, Logistic Unicorp, Metro Supply Chain Group, Raytheon, Thales, and WSP. Thank you for being there throughout the year. And our operational partners also, ATCO, AWS, Microsoft, Pratt & Whitney, and C-SPAN. 3 of which just joined us in the last month, actually. And it's a reminder to all these other businesses out there who are in the room right now, why are you not part of this list? What are you waiting for? It's the place, it's happening right here. So it's really our pleasure to host the minister today. And on that note, I'm going to let Guy Thibault, our president. Oh, actually, you won't? Oh, okay. Well, let's do that. I'm really bad at following orders. That's why they never took me into the military. That's why I'm here now. All right, so I'm going to introduce our 2 speakers from Metro Supply Chain Group to do the introductions.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Spies, and I lead customer development, strategy, and solutions at the Metro Supply Chain Group, a long-time sponsor of the Ottawa Conference. And on behalf of Metro and my colleague, Dan McCarroll, we are very pleased to be able to introduce our next speaker, the Honourable Anita Anand. And Ms. Anand was first elected Member of Parliament for Oakville, actually where I live, which is exciting, yeah? And now happens to serve as the Minister of National Defence. Now, Metro Supply Chain and the Conference of Defence Associates Institute are connected through our founder and group CEO, Honorary Colonel Chico Nanji. Now, Chico was appointed Honorary Colonel of the Canadian Army Intelligence in 2019 and serves on the board of the CDA Institute, amongst others. And he also contributes to many organizations, charities, communities through the Nanji Family Trust. So Metro Supply Chain was founded as far back as 1974 by the Nanji family. And under Chico's leadership has now grown to be a leading supply chain end-to-end supply chain solutions company. It operates a network of about 80 warehouses throughout North America and Europe, and we employ about 6,000 people. Last year alone, we delivered nearly 3 million last-mile deliveries, and we delivered nearly 1 billion cases of pandemic supplies. Metro Supply Chain provides a wide range of solutions across a number of the supply chain operations, including fulfillment solutions, ranging from warehousing to more complex e-commerce solutions, transportation solutions, including time-critical, fleet and freight management solutions, as well as last-mile deliveries covering both big and bulky and parcel deliveries. We also have a manufacturing support arm, which looks after things like line sequencing for manufacturing plants, as well as contract packaging. And we also have a consulting organization. We are a strategic partner to some of the world's leading known companies, and we cover many different industries, including the defense sector, consumer goods, retail, etc. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Dan McCarroll, to say a few words.
Thanks, Shano. Metro is very proud to be able to support NATO and our allies. We provide just-in-time logistics services for the manufacturing of tanks, armored vehicles, and personnel carriers, both here in Canada and in the UK. One of the other things we get to do, and as we're supporting, is we do service and repair logistics to make sure that our troops in the field have the parts they need for their equipment to make sure they're always at the ready, which, as world events are showing us right now, is important. And at Metro, we encourage everyone to donate to Red Cross or another organization that's providing humanitarian relief in the Ukraine, as our hearts are with them right now. And in a week that we celebrated International Women's Day, I'm extremely proud to introduce just the second woman to be Minister of National Defence in Canada, Anita Anand.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's absolutely my honor to be able to introduce to you the Minister of National Defence, the Honourable Anita Anand, who was first elected as a Member of Parliament for Oakville in 2019. She was previously served as the Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Minister Anand holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Studies from Queen's University, my alma mater, a Bachelor of Arts in Jurisprudence from the University of Oxford, a Bachelor of Arts from Dalhousie University, and a Master of Law from the University of Toronto. She was called to the bar in Ontario in 1994. Minister Anand has worked as a scholar, lawyer, and researcher. She has been a legal academic, including as a professor of law at the University of Toronto, where she held the J.R. Kimber Chair in Investor Protection and Corporate Governance. She served as Associate Dean and was a member of the Governing Board of Massey College and the Director of Policy and Research at the Capital Markets Research Institute, Rotman School of Management. She has also taught law at Yale, Queen's University, and Western University. Minister, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you.
Chris, you're making me nostalgic. Okay, I'm standing on a stool, which I requested, but I'm now going to just move that over, seeing as I'm not as short as I thought I was. Okay, well, good afternoon et bonjour tout le monde. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi d'être ici avec vous cet après-midi. I am very pleased to be joining you from the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And I want to start also by thanking Yuri and everyone at the Conference of Defense Associations Institute for organizing this incredible conference on security and defense. Let's give them a hand. Et je salue également la présence du général Wayne Eyre, chef d'état-major de la Défense, et je le remercie pour son leadership des forces armées canadiennes. Et je salue la présence du sous-ministre Bill Matthews et la chef du CST, Shelley Bruce, peut-être virtuellement. Ça fait 4 mois que le Premier ministre m'a demandé de servir en tant que ministre de la Défense nationale du Canada. I have not, and I will not, take a single day for granted. Time is of the essence in everything we do, when so much is at stake for Canada and for the world. We are facing the greatest threat to international peace and stability since the end of the Second World War. Russia's ongoing attack against Ukraine is also an attack on the rules-based international order. And for this reason, the work that you all do every day to promote stability and security in this world has never been more important. Today, for my remarks, I'm bringing forward a timely question. What can a country like ours, an incredible country like ours, bring to the table when the international order, upon which we all rely, is in such clear and present danger? En tant que Canadien, comment peut-on contribuer à la sécurité de notre monde? And I'm going to, in true professor fashion, address this question in 3 parts. Let us start with an update on Canada's support for our Ukrainian friends. We will then move to review Canada's contributions to address security challenges around the globe, including here in North America, in the Euro-Atlantic region, and in the Indo-Pacific. And finally, I will turn to discuss the importance of building a strong, healthy modern military that can indeed meet the security challenges that I've laid out above. Ukraine. On February 24th, I received a call in the middle of the night from Chief of Defense Staff, General Eyre, confirming what we all thought would occur, and indeed what open source intelligence said would occur, which is that Russian forces had commenced a full-fledged multi-pronged attack on Ukraine. For many years, Vladimir Putin has sought to rewrite history and to redraw maps to deny Ukraine's right to exist. And now Putin has turned his war on history into a war of aggression against innocent Ukrainian people, one that involves the crushing and horrible use of military force. Mais il est clair que Poutine a sous-estimé la force et le courage du peuple ukrainien. Ukrainians have bravely fought Russia's attack at every step. And I want to be clear, Canada stands with them, and we are here to help. Under Operation Unifier, Canada's training mission in support of Ukraine, our Canadian Armed Forces have trained over 33,000 Ukrainian soldiers, including 2,000 members of the Ukrainian National Guard. And through this mission, Canadian soldiers have conducted over 600 courses on tactical level combat, military policing, engineering skills, military medicine, and much more. This partnership has also been valuable for Canadian Armed Forces members themselves, who developed techniques in camouflage, concealment, and dispersion in this realm. When I was in Ukraine just over a month ago, I saw evidence of just how well Canadians and Ukrainians work together through Operation Unifier, and we are honored to support them in their courageous fight today. Le 26 janvier, nous avons annoncé la prolongation et l'élargissement de l'opération unifiée avec davantage de personnel qui reprendra les opérations de formation lorsque la situation sécurité la permettra. And under this announcement, the Communications Security Establishment, our national cryptologic agency, is also sharing threat intelligence with Ukraine and helping Ukraine defend itself against cyber attacks. In February, Canada donated $7.8 million in lethal aid to Ukraine, including machine guns, pistols, carbines, rifles, and 1.5 million rounds of ammunition, all of which arrived on the ground before Russia commenced its attack. But that was only the beginning. We are providing $25 million more in military equipment requested by Ukraine, including night vision gear, body armor, helmets, and Royal Canadian Air Force airlift support to deliver these goods to support NATO's efforts in the region. We are also providing additional lethal aid: 100 Carl Gustaf anti-tank weapon systems, 2,000 rockets, 600 fragmentation vests, 4,500 M72 rocket launchers, up to 7,500 hand grenades, and $1 million in funding for modern satellite imagery to help Ukrainian friends track the movement of Russian forces. And just this week, we announced an additional $50 million in military aid to purchase cameras for military drones. And in response to all of this support, my friend and counterpart, Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov, has thanked us time and time again, saying that real friends are known by deeds, and Canada is one of them. And I am in almost daily contact with Minister Reznikov, and today he told me, "We will win, and I will see you again." Au cours des dernières semaines, le Canada a également annoncé plusieurs tranches de sanctions économiques sévères et coordonnées contre des banques, des oligarques, des officiels russes, y compris Poutine lui-même. And thanks to Canada and our closest allies, we are moving to ensure that Russian banks cannot benefit from the SWIFT messaging system, moving to paralyze Russia's central bank as well. In short, all of these measures are designed to ensure that there is no safe haven for Russian oligarchs or their assets in the West. And when I visited Ukraine in February, really just a few weeks ago, I met with countless hardworking, smart people. And all they wanted was to be able to live in peace and freedom. And it is our moral obligation to stand with Ukrainians, and we will leave no stone unturned in our effort to support them. Moving now to the broader security environment, NATO, Norad, and global stability. We have to recognize that this war in Ukraine presents consequences for our multilateral partnerships and for the rules-based international order. And I want to focus briefly on North America, NATO, and the Indo-Pacific. So here at home, obviously, we cannot take our security for granted. Global security threats affect us all, and we have to be clear-eyed and ready for any eventuality. Cela commence par la défense continentale. La modernisation de Norad est un élément clé de ma lettre de mandat et j'ai l'intention de livrer la marchandise. I've got to say, I'm very driven by the mandate letter that the Prime Minister has given me. People say it's because I've been trained in report cards. But all I can say is that I focus on that mandate letter with my team every day. And part of that mandate letter is modernizing NORAD. Our recent budget invests over $252 million in initial funding for continental defense, with new investments in situational awareness, modernized command and control, research and development, defense capabilities to deter and defeat aerospace threats to the continent. But this is just the beginning. This is what I want to assure people of. This is just the beginning. We have so much more work to do on NORAD modernization. In that vein, I am in frequent contact with my counterpart, Secretary Lloyd Austin in the United States, about what we must and what we can do to enhance continental defense capabilities and ensuring the sovereignty of our Arctic. We are making landmark investments to increase our Arctic defenses through joint exercises, 6 new Arctic and offshore patrol vessels, enhanced surveillance and intelligence capabilities. Make no mistake, Canada will be at the table in the short term with a robust package to modernize NORAD, a system that has kept Canadians and Americans safe for over 60 years. Moving to the Euro-Atlantic, in Europe, our support for our NATO allies remains unwavering, ça c'est clair. Même si nous ne pensons pas qu'une attaque contre un pays, l'OTAN, soit imminente, nous devons être prêts et nous devons faire notre part pour assurer la sécurité de l'Alliance. Under Operation Reassurance, Canada is active on land, air, and sea to support our allies in Europe, especially those in NATO's eastern flank. And just this week, the Prime Minister and I announced the extension of the multi-year commitment beyond 2023. On land, Canada leads NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group in Latvia, with over 540 Canadian personnel on the ground and more to come. In fact, I just returned from Latvia, where alongside the Prime Minister and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, I visited Camp Adaji and witnessed the enduring integration between Canadian forces and our allied counterparts. In the air, our Royal Canadian Air Force participates on a rotational basis in NATO air policing missions in Romania, demonstrating our ability to respond to any possible incursion of Allied airspace. And I am pleased to confirm that our next air policing rotation will begin this summer. And at sea, Canada has a frigate deployed to the region on a persistent rotational basis, currently HMCS Montreal, soon to be joined by HMCS Halifax. And just a few weeks ago, we announced a significant expansion of Operation Reassurance itself, with up to 460 additional personnel. We will deploy an artillery battery and electronic warfare to the battle group in Latvia, a second frigate with a helicopter to NATO's maritime forces, and a CP-140 maritime patrol aircraft under NATO command. We've also announced 3,400 force armée canadien membres to be ready in case they receive the call from NATO. And we will continue to work with NATO to prepare for non-conventional threats, including in cyberspace. In short, our commitment to the security of our NATO allies is steadfast and unwavering. And we stand ready to defend every inch of NATO territory. Moving now to the Indo-Pacific, what this crisis has demonstrated more than ever is that Europe is not the only fault line in the global security environment at the current time. En tant que nation du Pacifique, le Canada est depuis longtemps un partenaire pour la paix, la coopération, la stabilité dans la région Indo-Pacifique. And what we're doing is developing Indo-Pacific strategy to guide Canadian engagement. But in the meantime, we must be committed to what we can do in that region. And the Royal Canadian Navy has had a long history of regional engagement, in fact. And we are looking to increase its presence with more port visits, with more training, with more exercises with international partners and allies. Why? We have to be fully cognizant about China's range of assertive activities in the Indo-Pacific region and around the world, and the patterns are there for all to see, frankly. China seeks to achieve its geopolitical goals through a mix of political, economic, and military means, including coercive behaviors in the East and South China Seas, hostage diplomacy tactics, as we saw with the two Michaels, irresponsible and very concerning behavior in cyberspace, and theft of intellectual property and sensitive technology. Ces actions violent l'ordre international fondé sur les règles et menacent les sécurités maritimes. We are not alone in being concerned about this region. Canada enjoys excellent relations with our Five Eyes partners in Australia and New Zealand, and we are working to deepen our relationships in the ASEAN and South Asia partners. And now my final section, and arguably the most important section for the duration and the longevity of the protection of our country and our continent and our contributions globally, and that's a strong and healthy military. Because none of the commitments that I have described here today are possible without a strong, healthy, and modern military that is equipped to fight and win. At the core of the military are people. Members of the Canadian Armed Forces are our #1 resource and our first priority. Throughout this pandemic, they have never faltered, always answering the call of service, and I want to thank every one of them from the bottom of my heart. Merci à vous tous, et je continuerai à me battre pour vous chaque jour. Ça, c'est ma responsabilité. Ça, c'est mon emploi. Ça, c'est très important pour nous, pour moi, pour notre équipe, pour notre gouvernement et pour notre pays aussi. And given the security challenges that we face, we want more Canadians to choose to wear the Canadian Armed Forces uniform. Under General Ayer's leadership, our Canadian Armed Forces are prioritizing reconstitution, recruitment, and the retention of talent. What does that look like? There are so many new programs and policies we have in place that I cannot mention them all here in this speech. But I will give you a taste of some of the things we have announced and we are working on. Last week, we launched our Total Health and Wellness Strategy. Through this strategy, we are investing nearly $1 billion to enhance health and wellness programs for our Canadian Armed Forces members, military families, civilian employees who are ill or injured, and who face difficult family circumstances on long deployment far from home. And General Ayer received a question on this yesterday. What about mental health? And I want to assure you and Canadians that mental health is top of our priority agenda for our Canadian Armed Forces. Moving on, I've met recently again with members of the Ministers' Advisory Panel on Systemic Racism and Discrimination to receive their final report about how we can build a more inclusive institution, an institution that welcomes everyone, that attracts talent from all segments of Canadian society, and that looks like Canada itself. And as our members work to keep Canadians safe, they must never be endangered by their own colleagues. La Lieutenant Générale Jenny Carignan, ici, devant moi, aujourd'hui, notre chef de conduite professionnelle et culture, a consulté avec des milliers de membres des forces armées afin d'entendre des voix diverses et de déterminer les prochaines étapes pour la culture de l'institution. Merci beaucoup, Jenny. And we are also proud to be expanding the reach and mandate of the Sexual Misconduct Response Centre, led by Dr. Denise Preston, where CAF members and DND employees can seek confidential support and professional counseling. Aussi très important. And last November, I announced, just 6 days on the job, which was somewhat daunting, that I accept in full the recommendation of Justice Louise Arbour to defer the investigation and prosecution of military sexual offenses to the civilian justice system. And we are modernizing the military justice system by fully implementing the Declaration of Victims' Rights. So all of this just goes to say that les changements culturels dans les forces armées canadiennes sont très importants pour moi, pour nous. Pourquoi? Parce que nous avons besoin d'une institution où tout le monde peut travailler avec les protections quand il travaille. And then lastly, on defense spending. The bottom line is that we need a well-equipped military that can defend our country and contribute to continental and global security. And not for a moment does this leave my mind. And I'm pressing and pressing to ensure that we, as a government, are able to step up, to support and invest in a well-equipped military that can defend our country and contribute to continental and global security. And you in this room, you know this better than most, that sustained and predictable investments are crucial. Now, I know that Chris is going to ask me about procurement, so I'll just preempt the questions a little bit by just saying that we know the stat of 70%. We know that we have committed under Strong, Secure and Engaged to invest over a 9-year period 70% in our defense spending. Ça, c'est important. It's a plan for our soldiers. It's a plan to ensure we have a modern and well-equipped military. Une flotte moderne, par exemple, d'avions de chasse est essentielle pour défendre le Canada. Et c'est pourquoi nous investissons dans le projet le plus important de l'histoire récente de l'aviation royale du Canada. It's a competitive and independent procurement process. And we are moving forward towards a contract award this year for the Future Fighter Capability Project, which will deliver a new fleet of 88 new fighter jets. And we are also investing in 15 Canadian service combatants for our Navy. This project will help revitalize the Canadian shipbuilding industry and will create tens and thousands of jobs in our country. Despite the global pandemic, we are still on track to increase our defense spending from $18.9 billion to $32.7 billion in 2026-27. And in conclusion, ça c'est un moment crucial pour notre monde, pour notre pays, pour notre continent. And our adversaries may think that they can erode the rules-based international order without consequence. But this order has kept us safe for the longest period of peace in modern history, and we will always step up to defend it. Our adversaries think that NATO can be divided because we are 30 sovereign states, but we are more united than ever before. Our adversaries think that we are weak because we are liberal democracies, but that is exactly what makes us strong. And alongside our allies, we are prepared to defend every inch of NATO territory. To those who wear the Canadian Armed Forces uniform, in this uncertain world, your service is more important than ever, and you make us proud, you make me proud to be Canadian. And I'd like to conclude, encore une fois, and ask you all to join me in thanking the members of our Canadian Armed Forces and the civilians who support them for your vital work to protect our country, our allies, and our partners, and the security of our world. Merci beaucoup.
Well, I don't know where to begin. You've taken most of my questions away. So thanks for those words, Minister. Minister, given the dramatic changes on the global scale that we've seen as a consequence of the Russia-Ukrainian war, are we seeing an emergence of a more clear expression of Canada's foreign and security policy? And if so, how do you think this could impact the Department of National Defence?
There's no doubt that the global security environment has changed. As I mentioned in my speech, this is the most egregious attack on the rules-based international order that we have seen since the implementation of Bretton Woods at the end of the Second World War. And given that fact of reality, there is no question that our foreign policy and certainly our defense policy has to adapt and has to be cognizant of emerging and existing threats that we have seen in just the past few weeks alone come to the fore. So the short answer to your question is yes, indeed. I think the harder question is the how and the what, and give me the details and provide the specifics. And that is what precisely I'm working on with my team every single day to ensure that we have Norad modernization fully on the table, to ensure that we are committed in an enduring way to the NATO alliance, including by recommitting to Operation Reassurance, as well as to our NATO activities writ large. So the answer is yes. And the work is happening now to ensure that we are prepared for any eventuality, including in terms of protecting our Arctic sovereignty.
Thanks, Minister. So based on that and recognizing that a defense policy has a shelf life, do you think that now is the time to update and refresh the policy and so that there's a little bit more clarity on next steps?
Well, what I'm trying to do on the ground is not wait for the time period that it usually takes to update a massive policy like strong, secure, engaged. There are many items in that policy that continue to be applicable and that are important for our national and continental security. And at the same time, at the Department of National Defense, what we can do is recommit and develop additional points of policy to act upon. And you heard me discussing some of these in the speech itself, and in particular in the Indo-Pacific. We have been working very closely with our allies in terms of developing our presence there, and that is something that we've discussed on a number of occasions that we will continue to do. Why? Because a Canadian and allied presence is important, not simply in terms of our NATO framework, not simply in terms of our Norad framework, but identifying threats globally that are at various stages of development, but certainly present, that we need to react to. And in order to be nimble, it is very difficult to say, well, we're going to develop a new policy and implement that before we react to a threat. We don't have the time to do that. We have to act now. And that's why I say that everything I work on at DND with a fantastic team is urgent. This is the time. And so we will continue to act on that basis.
Thanks, Minister. I'm just going to switch a little bit here now to talk a little bit about China. And I know you mentioned China, certainly in terms of the global security threats that affect us all in your speech. But in the last 2 weeks, Putin's Russia has erupted beliefs about European and transatlantic security that has been held for decades. Russia's new partner and rising great power, China, is more powerful by any metrics, and indeed is more powerful than its regional neighbors combined. Given China's significant potential to similarly challenge the international rules-based order, could you speak to how Chinese power could factor into the recalibration of our own defenses?
Sure. The answer is really a continuation of what I just said, which is we have to be clear-eyed about the fact that the NATO alliance and the countries that comprise it are being tested every day, not only in terms of the conflict in Ukraine, but also in terms of the threat that Russia and China present individually and potentially in collaboration with each other. And our role is to rely on our intelligence and to develop policies in response to emerging and existing threats. So our Indo-Pacific strategy that we are developing, being led by my colleague Minister Joly, is incredibly important. Working with our allies, incredibly important. Why? Because we can't be on our back foot relating to responses to threats. We have to be prepared and assume that those threats exist based on the information we see. And as I outlined in my speech, there are numerous indications of the existing threats in those, in regards to those two countries.
Thanks, Minister. So I was really pleased to hear you speak about building a strong, healthy, and modern military that is equipped to fight and win. And though I'm not going to talk about budgets, I do note that the Prime Minister has signaled that he is prepared to consider allocating additional resources to national defense. This is good news, but in terms of being able to actually spend the money, I mean, I think that's going to be the difficult part. The current procurement system is rigid and slow, and based on certainly your experience in your previous portfolio, I mean, where do you see us making it possible to accelerate the process?
Okay, well, first I'm going to push back against the idea about procurement being slow. In the COVID-19 pandemic, when I was the minister at Procurement, we led the world in the procurement of vaccines. And we were one of the first countries to reach the 80% mark for first shots in July 2021. So when procurement wants to act, procurement can act. And the advantage of, I think, having a minister who has been at the table in procurement in the past 2 years, and a deputy minister, which is where the brain power really lies, in procurement, is that we have the expertise at the table, and we are going to see more modernization of procurement processes, and we are working on that right now and have some very sound ideas that will help in this area. So procurement is important. We do need to continue to ensure that it runs efficiently and effectively, and the question relating to expenditures is also a good one. I think you referred to the Prime Minister's remarks earlier this week, and the Deputy Prime Minister also said publicly that she is in Europe looking on the ground at different options. So what my role is to deliver on my mandate letter, which includes ensuring that the Canadian Armed Forces has the equipment, large and small, the infrastructure, the institutional support so that it can flourish. Because when we stand back and look at even the last 2 years at what the Canadian Armed Forces has done for this country, it is remarkable. They have been in long-term care homes. They have helped with our vaccine administration and deployment. They have fought fires and floods and evacuated refugees from Afghanistan. And now, recognizing they've trained 33,000 Ukrainian soldiers, they're in Latvia. We need the Canadian Armed Forces. And we need to ensure that this is an institution that continues to thrive. So I will continue to press for resources for the Canadian Armed Forces so that they are prepared to fight and win.
So I am going to ask a final question of the minister. So if you do have questions, if you can make your way to the mics, that would be awesome. Thanks. And my final question is actually hopefully an easy one.
Yay!
Okay. So kind of given your mandate letter, which is fairly, there's a lot to be done. A lot to be done. And the fact that you've been in the department only for a few months, I really would like you to think ahead a couple of years. When you look back on this busy time and all that you have to accomplish, what do you want to be able to describe as the things that you were actually able to help improve?
So it's a great question because as an elected representative, we never know how long we're going to be in these roles, for better, for worse. And so I think about this a lot. What can I accomplish in what will likely be a short amount of time? And what I really think I must do is to put in place institutional change to ensure that those institutions have the longevity that survives changes in leadership. So what type of institutional change am I talking about? Cultural change in the Canadian Armed Forces. Solid and long-standing contributions to our multilateral alliances. Procurements that, while they may take years, are supported by contracts that serve Canadian taxpayers well, while at the same time ensuring that the Canadian Armed Forces will be well equipped. Those are the types of large principles that I operate under. And of course, because the time is so short, everything is urgent, as I said. And, people might say, well, everything can't be urgent because then nothing is urgent or will get done. But the reality is we are operating in a wartime situation, and we have been as a country since the onset of COVID-19. It's just been different types of wars. And what that requires from our elected leaders is for us to be 100% focused on our jobs, on our mandate letters, on serving the Canadian public, and on delivering, in my case, for the Canadian Armed Forces and the larger defense team. That's my priority. That's what I'm working on every single day, and I won't stop until someone tells me, you're no longer the minister.
Thanks, Minister. We'll take a question over here, please.
Hello. Bonjour. Je suis Karine Bibeau de Logistique Nica. Premièrement, Ministre Anand, merci de votre participation à la conférence d'Ottawa sur la sécurité et la défense. L'Australie et tout récemment l'Allemagne se sont commis à augmenter leur budget militaire à plus de 2% de leur PIB. Suite au commentaire d'hier du général Eyre sur la nécessité de reconstituer les forces armées canadiennes, pourriez-vous donner des détails additionnels sur comment le Canada pourrait atteindre ou même excéder ce niveau d'investissement?
Bien sûr, merci pour la question. Et aussi, c'est très important, les forces armées canadiennes et les changements que notre équipe a discuté chaque jour. Mais aussi, on a besoin de dépenses pour la défense de notre pays. Et comme j'ai dit, nous allons avoir 70% en dépenses pour la défense pendant les 9 années commencées avec, dans 2027 jusqu'à 2017 jusqu'à 2026. Mais quoi d'autre? Ça, c'est votre question, je pense. Quoi d'autre? Et chaque jour, je développe des options pour notre gouvernement de participer avec nos responsabilités dans l'OTAN, par exemple. Mais pas seulement l'OTAN, aussi la modernisation de Norad, c'est très important. Mais nous avons déjà commencé avec ça. Par exemple, nous avons confirmé un contrat avec Nato Corporation. Ça, c'est un contrat pour maintenir le North Warning System. Mais ça, c'est un exemple. Il y a des autres. Les menaces sont ici. Et ça veut dire que nous devons travailler avec nos partenaires comme le secrétaire Austin dans les États-Unis pour développer les plans, les options. Et quand nous avons ces plans, ça c'est le moment pour reconnaître que nous avons besoin plusieurs de dollars pour nos forces armées canadiennes, pour nos protections de notre continent.
Merci.
Merci.
So, Minister, I'm just going to grab a question here that came in through the wire. As part of our obligations to modernize NORAD, is there any particular plans for Canada to integrate itself into a North American-wide ballistic missile defense constellation?
So I cannot give away the plans to modernize NORAD in their intricacies at this time. But I will assure you that we are fully cognizant of the various threats that our current system allows to be present, and we are working very hard on bringing forward a robust package of new technologies in the short term for the modernization of NORAD.
Thank you. Question over here, please.
Hi, Minister. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Patrick. I'm a master's student at the Norman Patterson School. A topic that's been discussed a few times this week over the conference has been how Canadians, for the majority of Canadians, defense isn't necessarily a top-of-mind topic, but I think recent events around the world have shown us that whether we like it or not, we need to be engaged with our defense policies and our defense priorities. So my question is, from your perspective, how can the government, and I suppose also the people in this room, do a better job of engaging with average Canadians on our defense policies and our priorities, and as well being aware that it's a very complex topic? How can we make it accessible and easy to kind of digest and comprehend for average Canadians out there who are looking to learn more?
Well, thank you for that excellent question, and I am partial to higher education institutions, so I do appreciate the question about how we can ensure a broader, more fulsome understanding about defense and defense policy. And you're right that this is the moment for defense policy in terms of sharing our ideas and our thoughts and our understanding. But I will say that it is incumbent upon each one of us in this room to have the conversations, to express our views, to strive for better policy so that we can all move forward as a country together. This effort to modernize Norad, to reconstitute the Canadian Armed Forces, to ensure that we are living up to our Nato commitments, this cannot fall on the shoulders of one person or even a few people in government. This is a countrywide effort, and as I suggested, the importance of the Canadian Armed Forces for our country is undeniable. Very few people, I would say relatively speaking, understand the truth and gravity of that statement. And if I had one thing to ask all of you today in response to that question, it would be talk about the Canadian Armed Forces. Look at what they have done over the course of the past 2 years and 2, 3, 4, 5 decades. It's incredible, and we should be so grateful for their service. And so my role is to ensure that this institution has longevity, that we continue to build it up, and it is firmly placed on a foundation which is well-resourced and well-equipped so that it can continue to do the incredible work for our country that it has shown to do already. Thanks for the question.
Question over here.
Minister Richard Curran, you made the point, and I think everyone would agree, that the world has changed dramatically in the last couple of weeks, and the armed forces must change with it. Now, SSE was written back in 2016, 2017. A lot has changed since then. I think everyone would agree. SSE was based on what I would call the Afghanistan model, expeditionary operations and so on. But we're in a different league now. We're in strategic competition, possibly strategic warfare. The Canadian Armed Forces has done very well. There's no question about the quality of the people, but the problem is that we're too small. We need a bigger armed forces. We need a bigger defense capability. And this is the kind of thing I think that reconstitution must include. It takes time, but we've got to start. I'd appreciate your comments on that.
Well, thank you for the question. I agree. Let's start with that. I agree. We've got to grow this thing. We've got to grow. And I'm going to do everything I can with General Eyre and the broader defense team to make sure that happens. How do we grow the Canadian Armed Forces? Well, it's a multi-pronged approach. We've got to ensure we've got institutional supports to retain talent. We've got to make sure that members of the Canadian public who are deciding how they're going to spend their lives see the Canadian Armed Forces as a viable option for them. And I have spent my life thinking about this in the educational context. How can we make sure we have diverse institutions? Well, we have to have institutions where all Canadians see themselves as playing a part. And that means having institutions where discrimination and sexual harassment and other forms of unfair treatment are not present. That's, I think, a very basic statement. On top of those types of supports and institutions and principles, we also have to have a well-resourced institution. And I thought General Eyre's comments yesterday about affordability were apropos. General Eyre and I have been around the country visiting bases. And everywhere we go, Canadian Armed Forces members talk about the affordability crisis that they are facing. That it is very difficult to afford to live as a Canadian Armed Forces member when you have to travel all across the country and there's a general housing crisis that you find yourself in as a matter of course. And so part of what we're trying to do is make it attractive, make it palatable, make it possible for people to want to come. And that's what we are working on every day. And I've given you a couple of examples on culture and affordability. There are many other areas where we can implement processes so that you see yourself here as a member of the public. And then our 80,000 number of Canadian Armed Forces members will continue to grow. I have faith that this is going to work. Our reconstitution efforts are going to work. Why? Why are they going to work? It's not just the policies that I have laid out here. It's also because we have a team that is working extremely well together, and we are committed to reconstitution, we are committed to retention, and we are committed to rebuilding the Canadian Armed Forces, and it drives our work every single day. So can you come back next year and ask the question so I can give you an update on how we've done? Thank you.
So I'm very cognizant of the time, and unfortunately, or regrettably, we've actually run out of time. So my apologies to those who are lining up for additional questions. Next year, we'll have to make this 2 hours long.
Minister, indeed, we probably could spend another couple of hours with you, but we're so grateful for your presence, Chris, for being part of our team and for helping moderate this. Minister, it was really interesting last night. We were gathering for a little bit of a reception, and one of the comments that one of the participants made was, it's been very stressful just to be watching what's going on in the world. And while we talk about reassurance, what was reflected back was it's actually quite reassuring to get back together and to talk in person about some of these issues. When General Eyre took over as the Chief of Defence Staff, he talked a little bit about, in a crisis, what are you looking for? Well, you're looking for humility, you're looking for humble leaders that are calm and are determined, and that are guided by values. And Minister, this is a crisis, and I think that on behalf of all of us, I can say with honesty that we're really happy to see the leadership that's in place right now for our institution that we love so much, that we care for so much, that we've dedicated all of our lives to, and to see you with their defense team at this time of a crisis being guided by your values with a sense of purpose and a sense of urgency. So on behalf of all of the members of CDA, the CDA Institute, those who are online watching us, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank General Eyre and Bill Matthews and the rest of the defense team, the Armed Forces leadership team that's with us here today, the Vice, Jenny, Craig, Monsieur Grégoire, Simon. It's wonderful to have you all here, and we really appreciate you taking the time. And if I could, just before we let you go, Minister, because we're going to wrap up, this is the end of 3 days for the Ottawa Conference. I'd like to thank you all for participating. We've had a really wonderful, I think, 3 sets of days to answer the earlier question about what can we do. Well, that's actually part of our mandate here. It's actually to become kind of the apostles for spreading the word about why this is so important for Canada, for Canadians, and for our future. Yuri, to you and the entire CDA Institute little executive team that we've got that pulls together such a conference. We're really, really grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that we can see you at the Montreal conference that's going to be happening in May. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the Vimy Gala in November, where we get to recognize our Vimy Award winner. Thank you very much for participating. Minister, thanks once again.